It's my second paper for this workshop on cosmology and theology, organized within the framework of project Science and Orthodoxy around the world, a project that runs at the Institute of Historical Research of the National Hellenic Research Foundation in Athens. This paper is also the fruit of a cooperation, as my previous one, this time round with Professor, I think in Dutch is pronounced Richard Grijs, I assume, Richard I call him, who is a professor of astronomy at Macquarie University in Sydney. The work that we have produced together is called The Cosmology of David Bohm, Scientific and Theological Significance. As with my previous paper, of course, I won't be able to address in any detail Richard's contribution. I'll just walk you through, giving you the highlights of this paper. It's one of those times of the year that's just to give you some background, we have finished our semester, and most scientists now undertake research, and in this case Richard has time allocated with one of the Australian telescopes, so that was scheduled far in advance, and that's that. He can't be here to present his contribution. Anyway, David Bohm. Let me read the abstract so that everyone has kind of idea of where we are heading with this one. So we propose a double approach to the contributions of David Bohm by emphasizing his dual role as a physicist and thinker. First, the Grijs introduces Bohm's universe with its themes and sources, and with an emphasis on the physical quest that led Bohm to the elaboration of an original cosmology at the nexus of science and wisdom. Next, Costache takes his cue from the Grijs explorations by highlighting the affinities between Bohm's somewhat esoteric scientific cosmology and patristic ideas that are central to the Orthodox worldview. It is our hope that this approach will stir the interest of Bohm's scholars in the Orthodox worldview, and also lead theologians to nurture an appreciation for Bohm's cosmology. Now, the first section of this paper, and of course the first half of it is written by Richard. So the first section is a theory of everything, and I'm certain that all of us here have an idea of what this is, the quest for the ultimate explanation of reality, or as Richard puts it, as you can see there in text, who we are, where do we come from, and what is the nature of reality. These are questions that supposedly can be explained by the theory of everything that still eludes us. And of course, he points out the fact that David Bohm, who died in 92, is, as he says, perhaps the most poorly known contributor to this quest for a theory of everything. So this is the backdrop. This is the framework from where we should understand the Bohmian project. the quest for a theory of everything. And as you can see in this first section, Richard mentions some classical Greek antecedents of the quest for a theory of everything, antecedents that sort of had some impact upon Bohm's worldview. And he concludes this section as follows: by ascertaining the plenitude of space and by redefining matter against this backdrop, philosophical that is and scientific, Bohm challenged the basic ideas at the core of the prevailing classical theories, calling them out for the unclear nature and inherent contradictions of their underlying assumptions. He suggested that physics required a radically new order. So there were all those contradictory statements in modern physics that of course, I'm not qualified to discuss. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he continues, Bohm's challenges to the fundamental status quo were seen as a threat to his colleagues and to the government. And indeed, there was a political dimension to Bohm's career. But perhaps this relative, transitional conclusion of Richard's explains why, to this day, David Bohm remains a controversial figure, not liked by his fellow scientists, not liked by many thinkers. Now, the second section is Undivided Wholeness. So, this is a concept dear to Bohm. It's not that we need to find that theory of everything that can give us the ultimate answers to our most haunting questions. It is a matter of realizing the continuum of reality. So this undivided wholeness, all things pertaining to all things, or all things interacting, being consubstantial, you would say philosophically or theologically, with all things. And of course, we see Richard pointing out the fact that in Bohm's elaboration on this concept of undivided wholeness, towards this concept contributed various factors from research into the atomic bomb to the various physical experiments of modernity, and also philosophical ideas, including some kind of impact of Einstein's on Bohm. But let's read a bit from this second section. Bohm's insights made the leading scientists of the day sit up and pay attention. As a case in point, Einstein sent him a letter stating, quotation, "I am very astonished about your announcement to establish some connection between the formalism of quantum theory and relativistic field theory. I must confess that I am not able to guess how such unification could be achieved." Well, yes, Einstein was right. To this day, we are still seeking this connection, which might be the theory of everything that we're trying to pinpoint or obtain. And perhaps everyone here is aware of the more recent quest of Hawking, who wanted to bridge the two theories, quantum and relativity. But, says Richard, Bohm's focus on standard quantum mechanics did not last. He was asked to teach a course on the subject, and although he did so adequately, that's a very politically correct and neutral qualification, he confessed to not fully understanding the subject, and so he set out to write a comprehensive and much lauded monograph on quantum mechanics titled Quantum Theory. Here, unexpectedly, Bohr's, the physicist Niels Bohr, Bohr's theoretical digressions led him, Bohm, to pursue the idea of wholeness, where everything is interconnected at a deeper level of reality. Yeah, and then there's the even more elusive concept from my viewpoint of hidden variables. I have no physical training, and therefore I'm unable to grasp the intricacies of this concept. Though I have to confess, I tried to browse the two articles in Physical Review in 1952. Of course, the formalism, the mathematical formalism, is far above my pay grade. But yes, well, some of those conclusions I think can be grasped even by one like me. But I repeat, I won't get there. I won't even try to understand what's this about. But anyway, let's have again a look at what Richard says. Among the hidden variables, Bohm introduced hypothetical, unobservable entities to explain quantum mechanical properties in the context of a deterministic theory. He objected to the classical quantum mechanical idea of Heisenberg's indeterminacy between a particle's speed and location, for instance. Einstein fundamentally disagreed, calling Bohm's theory a physical fairy tale for children. Well, political correctness at its best. This is surprising given that Einstein famously declared that I am convinced God does not play dice. Well, if God doesn't play dice, then perhaps the hidden variables are something to look at more favorably. Anyway, in fact, continues Richard, Bohm's reference to order at the quantum level should have pleased him. But Einstein's opposition is understandable. It is well known that he believed that quantum mechanics is an incomplete description of reality. So the problem, the way I see it, is Einstein's resistance to the idea of quantum physics, not so much a rejection of Bohm's proposal. And yeah, this is also interesting. Leading physicists, most notably his former mentor, Oppenheimer, tried their best to find flaws in Bohm's theory. They were unable to, and so they ignored him. In Oppenheimer's own words, uttered at a conference in Princeton dedicated to Bohm's work, quotation, "If we cannot disprove Bohm, then we must agree to ignore him." Wolfgang Pauli in turn considered Bohm's extra wave mechanical prediction still a check, which cannot be cashed, while Niels Bohr, called him very foolish. So the attempt of David Bohm, the way I see it, to arrive at the theory of everything was met with reticence, reluctance, even mockery. Not good for the soul, I think. But in time, says Richard, in Bohm's scientific contributions received due recognition, and so did too his philosophical thinking. And the next section, dealing with Krishnamurti's influence, is perhaps the most digestible from my viewpoint, of course, as a trained theologian, not a scientist. But I think for you gentlemen here, this section would be the least interesting. Anyway, what matters is that according to this rendition, Richard's rendition, Krishnamurti exercised a tremendous influence upon Bohm's worldview and helped him grasp the intricacies of the concept of wholeness. And let me read at least this. Krishnamurti's fundamental tenet was that thought itself is an actual movement in our lives, a physical and physiological movement of great power. Indeed, Bohm was profoundly influenced by Krishnamurti's Eastern philosophy. His attraction to Krishnamurti's philosophy may be best described as his adherence to the wholeness of life. Life, nature, and consciousness were a single, indivisible whole, a notion shared by both of them, both men. And then Richard returns to another scientific aspect of Bohm's worldview, the topic of split duality, again one of those things that I won't be able to grasp. But I'm certain those of you that are physically trained know very well what this is. It's, of course, references to some experiments there and the result in wisdom for Bohm's worldview, culminating in this articulation of the pilot wave or Bohm-de Broglie theory. And then let me read this one in full wholeness, so the last section. Bohm's hidden variables theory was in agreement with this new development, in particular with predictions of the non-locality of reality, that is, the interconnectedness of the universe, where Bohm's hidden parameters would be non-local. This concept is problematic from a classical perspective, where communication is limited by the finite speed of light, suggesting that events are localized rather than non-local, and information is not transmitted instantaneously to any remote corners of the universe. The universal acceptance among physicists of the finite speed of light is hence a major obstacle to Bohm's concept of hidden variables as non-local. The theory behind the non-locality of reality also suggests that there exists a hidden regime of reality that cannot be accessed, and which will hence remain beyond the realm of science and the scientific method, a domain of reality that perhaps we have not yet understood, or at least not well enough. If the putative quantum potential is eventually proved, the existence of non-locality, the profound interconnectedness of the physical universe, is consequently also confirmed. What matters for now is that the premise of wholeness pertaining to quantum potential framework also agrees with Bohr's classical quantum physics idea. So Niels Bohr again. Let's see how Bohm looks at Bohr's ideas, how he assimilates those ideas. I tried, Bohm says, to get some idea of what might be the process which was implied by the mathematics of the quantum theory, and this process is what I call enfoldment, that the mathematics itself suggests a movement in which any particular element of space may have a field which unfolds into the whole, and the whole unfolds into it. If you look at the mathematics of the quantum theory, it describes a movement of just this nature, movement of waves that unfold and fold, so unfold and enfold throughout the whole of space. You could therefore say that everything is enfolded in this whole, or even in each part, and that it then unfolds. I call this an implicate order, the enfolded order, and this unfolds into an explicate order. The implicate is the unfolded order. It unfolds into explicate order in which everything is separated, or I guess distinct at least. Anyway, this is fascinating for me, and you'll see how I grapple with this idea in the second part of this paper. It's that idea of connectedness that is also present in the classical thinking of ancient Greece, but also in the patristic tradition in relation to the concept of microcosm, or the recapitulation of the whole into each and every of its parts, and so on and so forth. At a fundamental level, Bohm's theory suggests that out of perceived emptiness, says Richard, resembling the vacuum state, particles interact with, respond to, and are informed by an information potential which allows the cosmos to emerge. This information in the quantum potential makes it possible for the universe as we know it to exist. In other words, everything we know and don't know yet is equivalent to information, which at some point is expected to unfold into reality. The implicate is waiting to become explicate, thus showing the true nature of the split duality of particles and trajectories. Reality is thus undivided wholeness, combining life, the universe, and everything. Well, I'm certain that when you read this paper, those of you who are scientists will understand much more than I do. In the next part of this presentation, I'll be reading my own reflections on Richard's presentation of David Bohm's worldview. So, as Richard concluded just above, Bohm's worldview draws parallels to religious idea and as such welcomes science, philosophy, spirituality, etc. This rich gold field still awaits theologically trained prospectors to map and mine it. Bohm's philosophical thinking is extremely appealing, especially for researchers of the patristic representations of reality. It seems to me that above all, its attraction consists in that it integrates what Pierre Teilhard de Chardin called le tout et la personne, the whole and the person. True, for Teilhard de Chardin, the integration of these poles of existence is principally achieved, again in his words, by le phénomène chrétien, the Christian phenomenon. The extent to which Bohm would have shared in de Chardin's enthusiasm for Christianity is uncertain, especially in the light of the Grijs last few quotations, where actually I skipped those, but it's where you can see David Bohm's eclectic cast of mind, especially prone to borrowing from South Asian philosophies. Okay, but the extent to which Bohm would have shared in the Chardin's enthusiasm for Christianity is uncertain, but their respective perceptions of reality are mutually consistent. That's what I believe. Bohm himself contemplated the relationship between the thing and the thought, or thought and non-thought, within the context of a reality that ultimately remains unknown and unknowable. My quotations are mainly from his book Wholeness. But to draw out similarities and dissimilarities between their respective approaches, that is, Bohm's and de Chardin's, falls outside the scope of this essay. What matters is that their efforts are characteristic of the modern attempt to articulate the theory or the narrative of everything. What matters more for my purposes here is that their efforts clearly resonate with the related concerns of early Christian and early medieval theologians. Indeed, the patristic tradition documents a great many corresponding attempts. Certain early Christian and early medieval authors provide simple catalogues of reality's components, that is, by listing the objects that populate the created realm. Others produced comprehensive narratives. Their efforts, meant as articulations of the Christian worldview, do not count scientifically, at least not by the standards of our own time. But, as Werner Heisenberg and Michio Kaku observed, that some ancient intuitions about reality foreshadow contemporary physics, the same holds true for Christian thinking. By drawing on Heraclitus and the insights of other ancient Greek theorists, Bohm himself agreed to their point implicitly. Against this backdrop, the efforts of the early Christian and medieval theologians to map reality are part and parcel of the broader history of scientific ideas. And actually, I have discussed this topic elsewhere in the book I published last year, Humankind and the Cosmos, page 246. Against this backdrop, the efforts of the early Christian and medieval theologians to map reality are part and parcel of the broader history of scientific ideas, and I'll give two relevant examples. An anonymous 2nd century treatise known as Letter to Diognetus includes a list of the cosmic regions known to the ancients. These are, I quote, the skies and things celestial, the earth and the earthly things, the sea and things aquatic, as well as fire, air, the abyss. In other words, things on high, things in the depths, things in between. That's from Letter to Diognetus, chapter 7, line 2. In the process of mapping the cosmos, the passage, read just above, refers to the fundamental elements known at the time, namely earth, water, air, and fire. These correspond to the exotic domain researched by contemporary quantum physics. But a small scale of the fundamental elements, the microcosm, or closer to the text, the abyss or the depths, is but one side of things. Reality also encompasses the familiar universe or the macrocosm, the sky and the earth, and all things that populate these regions. But this catalogue is not complete as such, given the theological nature of the treatise's narrative. The macrocosm and the microcosm feature together as a field where divine providence operates. God's logos, organizing, defining, and connecting all things, says the author of Diognetus. It's from the same passage, chapter 7. The divine activity plays the role of a nexus between the various parts of the microcosm and of the macrocosm, thus securing order. But it does so from within and through the laws of nature, not by superimposing it from outside. The idea echoes Heraclitus, for whom the wise is able to grasp, I quote, the will that leads all things through all things. Apart from the explicitly theological statements of Diognetus, Bohm would have been thrilled to read these lines. After all, he searched for ways of explaining how the quantum microcosm and the relativistic macrocosm, the implicate and the explicate, the enfolded and the unfolded orders connect. Immediately relevant here is that the treatise bridges the various layers of the ancient worldview into a comprehensive picture. But Diognetus completes the cartography of the universe by referring to what our culture knows as the Anthropic cosmological principle. I quote, God loves human beings. He created the cosmos for them, and to them he subjected all things on the earth. End of quote. This is from chapter 10 in Letter to Diognetus. This might not be a detailed point about the mutually attuned humankind and the cosmos, but it definitely shows that the holistic view of reality cannot ignore human presence. The author, therefore, was not insensitive to the concerns more recently expressed by Desjardins and David Bohm. Centuries later, Maximus the Confessor presented a far more detailed map of things. In his Book of Difficulties, also known as the Ambigua, he proposes what I usually call a medieval theory or narrative of everything. The relevant chapter outlines 5 layers of reality, each containing 2 polarities. First, the created and the uncreated. Second, the intelligible and the sensible orders. Third, the sky and the earth. Fourth, paradise and the inhabited land. Fifth, male and female. Every second term of each layer shelters a narrower layer within itself, a smaller circle within the larger one. Well, the passage that you see there actually just details the summary I have presented of the 5 layers. The largest circle is the ultimate division of reality, of God and the universe. The narrowest layer is the gender division comprising maleness and femaleness. The other 3 circles contain the visible and invisible universe in its entirety, then only the visible universe divided into sky and the earth, and finally the earthly domain divided into paradise and the inhabited land. So it's a very complex depiction of reality. This schematic representation does not exhaust reality. The earthly biosphere is not even mentioned, but it still depicts a comprehensive worldview. In addition, this worldview combines a range of cultural and disciplinary perspectives that is doctrinal, the first circle, created, uncreated, metaphysical, the second circle of Platonic resonance, discussing the invisible and the visible, scientific, the third circle of Aristotelian resonance, sky and earth, and scriptural, the last 2 circles, paradise and the inhabited land, and then male and female. Those are the main concepts present in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, respectively. But more important from my viewpoint are 2 further details of Maximus's theory. On the one hand, the natural objects within the created realm, the sky and the earth, and all populations nestled within them, human and non-human, can be unified. On the other hand, the agent of unification is the human being, as long as it adopts a divine or virtuous lifestyle that leads to insight, theological insight, or divine insight, if you like. What makes possible the unification of all layers of created reality is the fact that within each particular being are found, enfolded, Bohm would say, the characteristics of its species. In like manner, and on a deeper level, within each species is enfolded the nature of the universe. In Bohm's words, I quote, "In some sense, each region contains a total structure enfolded within it." End of quote. Since the universe's stuff is the nature of all things, they are one. They are compatible, they are present in one another, and they naturally intersect and combine in order to form more complex structures within the universe. No wonder the human being related to all things, I quote from St. Maximus, constituting something like a natural connector of the whole through mediating by its own parts between the extremities, is able, so the human being is able to access them and to contribute to their unity. The observer and the observed are one, Bohm would say. Both theologians, the early Christian, that is the author of Diognetus, and the early medieval, St. Maximus, agreed that to make sense of human existence entails to understand the place humankind has within the universe. To me, this amounts to saying that we need a theory, or rather a narrative of everything. And I move to a different topic, chaos to cosmos. The patristic examples reviewed just above not only document an interest in narratives of everything, they also bring to the fore the dynamic of cosmic unity, of all aspects of reality. As it happens, there are patristic authors whose ideas come even closer to the modern concerns, including Bohm's, pertaining to bridging the quantum world and the relativistic universe. Once again, I shall provide 2 examples. My first witness is Gregory of Nyssa. In his treatise, An Apology for the Hexaemeron, among other things, he discusses the processes that led from chaos to the ordered universe. He addresses this topic under the guise of his theory of matter, as well as when tackling the thorny issue of how the unified light of the beginning has become the many lights or celestial bodies within the cosmos. In the first case, corresponding to Diognetus, Gregory of Nyssa took as starting point the conviction that, I quote, some wise and organizing principle lies within each of these beings, or the beings. So this is a quotation from his book Apology, chapter 10. This organizing principle, present within nature, facilitates the generation of beings by activating the fundamental elements and qualities towards material combination and unity. The process amounts to the immaterial becoming phenomenal. And I quote from his Apology, chapter 7 this time. To finish making the beings, and by the way, all these quotations are my translation from the Greek. So, to finish making the beings, God the Holy Mighty established by way of his wise and powerful will everything of which matter consists. Here are the components. What is light and what is heavy, dense and porous, soft and hard, moist and dry, cold and hot, also color, shape, contour, and extension. Taken one by one, all these are mere thoughts and concepts. None of these of itself constitutes matter. They become matter when they converge into one another. And you see here some Greek phrases, in this case, converge into one another. Syndramonda prosalida. What matters here is not Gregory's out-of-date particle physics. What matters is the vision of nature as a dynamic outcome of converging qualities in the presence of the divine factor. Corresponding to the author of Diognetus, Gregory's divine principle, the Logos, repeatedly designated as wisdom, will, and power, and you see a string of passages where St. Gregory mentions this phrase. So the Logos is not an extraneous factor. It operates from within the universe by facilitating the combination of the fundamental elements. This understanding is reminiscent of Heraclitus' point that all beings become in accordance with the Logos. Heraclitus. That's fragment 1 from his collection, where we read, Ginomeno garpandon kataton logon. That said, for Gregory, matter emerges through the aggregation of immaterial properties, qualities of which we know, but that cannot be grasped before we see them as concrete beings. The way he phrases this situation resonates with our experience with the quantum world. The process of universe making is analogous to the process of matter making sketched just above. As the preliminary stage for discussing the emergence of the cosmos, drawing upon his understanding of matter making, Gregory considered the manner in which the original darkness of Genesis 1, verse 2, had become the light of Genesis 1.3 or verse 3. The darkness of chaos possessed the potentiality of light, of order, and became light at God's prompting. The divine energy, I quote, radiating through the darkness and flaw of nature, says Gregory in chapter 65 of his Apology, transformed the darkness into light, or the chaos into order. To explain how this occurred, Gregory deployed the Aristotelian notion of actualization. Light is the actualized form of the potentiality represented by darkness. Gregory's physics of light does not end here, for in the universe can be found various forms of light, solar, lunar, stellar, etc., not merely one. He wanted to understand how the unified light of the first day of the creation narrative became the many lights of the fourth day. He approached this topic from two angles, epistemological and ontological, in Apology chapters 8 and 9 and chapters 64 to 74, respectively. To be more specific and epistemologically speaking, the unified light of the first day refers to reality as perceived by the divine eye. It is God's grasp of things, a theological and contemplative lens, one would say. In turn, the many lights of the universe materialized in the seven spheres of the Ptolemaic cosmography and in the celestial bodies that populate them, represent the human viewpoint, analytical and scientific. When considered through the ontological or cosmological lens, the differentiation of the original light into the universe's many lights refers to physical processes. As Gregory has it, and I quote from Apology 65, up to then, that is, to the divine commandment, let there be light, light was gathered within itself, coextensive with the whole, but after the commandment it diversified into what was shared and what distinct in regard to its parts. What causes differentiation is cosmic motion, namely the fact that the various parts of the universe in the making move differently. In turn, what conditions their specific movements are the different manners in which they combine the qualities inherent to the light or fire that is fundamental of all things. Indeed, like for Heraclitus, and that's a reference to fragment 30, 32a, and 33, Gregory believed that all beings derive from the dynamic factor called fire, or in scriptural parlance, light. So all things come from fire. We read this in Apology chapter 72. Thus, whether he knew of Heraclitus's ideas or not, he had a strong intuition of the natural dynamics pertaining to the manifestation of what we call the quantum world into or as the material universe. Once again, Bohm would have appreciated this insight, as he was concerned with the same topic, of course, explaining it by way of our world's means, or the means, technological and scientific instruments of our civilization. My second witness is John of Damascus, or John Damascene, who, in his book An Exact Exposition of the Orthodox Faith, pursued a similar train of thought, though not developing it to the extent to which Gregory did. Thus, chapters 19 to 24 of the critical edition, or more commonly chapters 5 to 10 or of part 2 in the popular edition, map the visible cosmos by showing what regions of the universe correspond to the fundamental elements known to the ancients. Also, what natural phenomena occur and what kinds of beings can be encountered in those places. Interestingly, alongside the four material elements, John lists a more profound level of reality, the sky, which shelters all of creation. In his words, the sky is the container, periohi, of the visible and the invisible creations, as we read in Exposition chapter 20. The cosmic sense of our own age is already present in a nutshell here. And although in the next line John mentions invisible creations, namely the noetic beings called angels, his worldview is basically physicalist. The sky, uranos, is neither the metaphysical realm of the eternal forms nor the religious spiritual heaven. It is of one piece with the four material elements of earth, air, fire, and water. God created the sky, space, or the container of everything, and the four elements together, out of nothing. It is from these elements, then, that God made all else. And this is roughly what the passage quoted there from chapter 19 of the exposition says. No point in reading all that. There is no ontological gap within the created universe. Differently said, there is an unbroken continuity between the fundamental elements and the macrocosm, the world of our experience, including the earthly ecosphere. John's physics could not explain, of course, how the fundamental elements combine in order to engender the complex orders of being familiar to our experience. Nor was he eager to engage the scientific knowledge of his time in critical fashion. It is true that he reviewed several hypotheses about the nature of the sky, but he expressed no need to choose between them. It's funny enough. His reluctance to favor any of the existing theories accord with his conviction that the sky's nature eludes us. As we know, it still does, about 90% of it. It's something I discussed in the other paper written together with Geraint Lewis. That said, John showed appreciation for other aspects of the available physics. He believed, for example, that all things around us are made of the fundamental elements God created out of nothing. It is at this juncture that I turn to his strategy to describe the various layers of reality in connection with the fundamental elements. This is how he proceeded in chapters 21 to 24, or in the popular edition, part 2, chapters 7 to 10. First describing the qualities of the four elements, then exploring the beings and the phenomena that derive from them. As its heading announces, chapter 21, or popular edition, part 2, chapter 7, deals with light, fire, the luminaries, that is, the sun and the moon and the stars. Many other astronomical and astrological topics make cameo appearances, however. His discourse about fire includes the primordial light and the celestial bodies, the orbits of the seven wanderers, or planets, so called because they move contrary to the orbits of the fixed stars, as the ancients perceived them, the solstices and the seasons, the zodiacal signs, comets and eclipses, the solar and the lunar years, and the phases of the moon. As with the sky, we ignore the true nature of these beings and phenomena. John was aware of the limitations of the available sciences and, it seems, longed for more precise explanations of the cosmos. Here he anticipates Bohm's own attitude. John approached the other elements in the same fashion, discussing in chapter 22, or the popular edition, part 2, chapter 8, the nature of air and the atmosphere. Then in chapter 23, or 9 in the second part of the popular version, the qualities of water and the forms it takes around us, seen as the habitat of aquatic species. And in the next one, chapter 24, the fundamental element of earth and the earth as a place of human habitation shared with animals, birds, and plants. So the element of earth and earth as a place, as a planet, as we call it. These descriptions appear to a modern reader either as overly simplistic or as downright erroneous. It is for this reason that I have no intention to present them in any detail. But what matters is that John was able to establish, albeit intuitively, a relation between the fundamental elements and the various regions of the cosmos, closer to us or more distant, all of which he ultimately understood as belonging together within the one expanse of the sky, the universe. What secures the link between all things is the fact of being created. This is something that I also found in St. Athanasius of Alexandria. This explanation could not satisfy a modern reader, including Bohm, but it still is a way of affirming the homogeneity of all things within the universe, as well as the inner connection between fundamental physics and cosmology. After all, as Richard observes, for Bohm, I quote, "Everything is internally related to everything else, and each part of the cosmos contains the whole universe." Now, I move to further patristic topics. But perhaps Bohm would have been more thrilled about other patristic ideas, like the microcosm, inherited from the classical culture and developed in quite interesting ways. Many early Christian authors contemplated the ontological solidarity between humankind and the universe. Their views range from simple affirmation of universal consistency to sophisticated statements about human nature as summarizing the whole of the creation. In the first category falls the point of Athanasius of Alexandria, namely, quote, "The human race is a part of the whole." This he says in his book On the Incarnation, chapter 41. Meros gar tu pandos και το άνθρωπον εστι γένος. So των ανθρώπων εστι γένον. So the race of people is a part of the whole of the universe. Other authors went well beyond this point. For example, Gregory the theologian of Constantinople showed that human nature is a composition, symbixis, or a mixes of qualities and processes also encountered throughout the universe. As such, the human being is a world in miniature, he says, a microcosm. We read this in his Oration 28. He returned with an explanation elsewhere, presenting human nature as the midpoint between the intelligible, accessible through noetic perceptions, and the sensible, accessible through the senses, so noetic and sensible regions of the cosmos. While these regions remained within their specific boundaries and silently sang different praises, Gregory says poetically, the created Logos decided to make the human being, I quote, as a single animal which consists of both, namely the invisible and the visible natures, taking therefore the body from the already structured matter and blowing out from himself the breath, the demiurge, the creator, placed on earth the human being as a kind of second world, great within the small one, another angel, a composite worshipper. This is not only poetic language, it's also strikingly paradoxical. The human being is the big world in the small one, a reversal of perspectives. True, the term microcosm does not appear here. I haven't said where I got it from, so it's Oration 38, chapter 11. The term microcosm does not appear here directly, but the sense that the composite worshipper gathers within its nature the elements of the visible and the invisible universe is inescapable. Furthermore, the passage strikingly presents the second world, the human being, as great within the small one, therefore larger than the universe. Paradoxes. This perspective is provocative, and since Gregory did not seem interested in detailing his proposal, it took the genius of Maximus the Confessor to explain, centuries after, that the human microcosm had the calling to change the universe into, I quote, a large human being, through the successive transformative unifications sketched above. And you remember the 5 layers of reality. To paraphrase Bohm, this amounts to saying that the thing becomes thought, which would not be a strange avenue for him to contemplate. After all, he wondered, I quote, may not thought itself thus be a part of reality as a whole? That's in his book Wholeness, page 11 of the introduction. Bohm would be content with other patristic ideas too. Perhaps one of his most striking and interesting contributions, at least from my viewpoint, is his development of the perspective of the Rio mode. I hope that this is how it's pronounced. The flowing mode of thinking and talking about the universe's flowing nature. We find references to this in Wholeness, page 14 of the book and page 14 of the introduction. His concept of an undivided wholeness in flowing movement, and as he calls it, is crucial for clarifying how mind and matter interact, but also how the implicate order of the enfolded becomes the explicate order of the unfolded. I shall not delve here, however, either into his perception of the constant flow of nature or into his point that in order to capture this situation, we need a language of verbs and adverbs, not nouns and adjectives. What I intend to do is show that certain early Christian and medieval theologians had a similar grasp of the flowing nature of reality. Athanasius, for instance, presents the universe as fundamentally, I quote, flowing, insubstantial and mortal, or, he says elsewhere, fluid and dissolvable. So this is in his Against the Gentiles chapter 41, various parts of the chapter. And even though he neither developed Bohm's verbal language nor appraised the situation on a global scale, others after him, after Athanasius, that is, Gregory of Nyssa and Maximus the Confessor, developed this intuition, characterizing nature as movement, an intuition shared by contemporary Orthodox thinkers. You can refer to some of my works and also Alexei's The Sense of the Universe. For example, he speaks of these on pages 1113 and 246. Heraclitus, the philosopher of movement who inspired Bohm so much, would have been proud of his patristic airs, and so should have been Bohm himself too. In this light, reaching my conclusion, I spoke for too long. In this light, and despite the historical gulf separating him from the patristic authors, I believe that Bohm would be excited about their ideas, especially the concepts of the microcosm encapsulating and generating the macrocosm, and of the chaos of the fundamental elements transformed into cosmos, share an affinity with his idea of implicate order leading to the emergence of our universe, explicate order. Of equal significance are the patristic contemplation of the universe's anthropic dimension, including its infrastructure that draws on the logos behind all things, and the narratives of everything, all of which mirroring Bohm's quest for bridging the thing and the thought. By all intents and purposes, the patristic perception of reality, holistic and dynamic, anticipates Bohm's cosmology, where enfolded patterns operating under the guise of hidden variables are the source of the unfolded, ordered universe. In return, his profound cosmological thinking provides contemporary theologians with new opportunities for grasping and for communicating certain patristic intuitions about reality. Thank you, and sorry for taking it too long to finish.